Om Parthaya Pratibodhidam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Gridhidam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaidam Radavarshinim Bhagavadim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatva Manusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavadveshinim Yam Brahma Varunendra Rudramarudastunnandi Divaistavaihi Vedai Sangapadakramopanishadai Gayanti Yam Samagaha Dhyanavasthita Tadgatena Manasa Pashyanti Yam Yogino Yasyandam Navidusura Suraganaha Devaya Tasmai Namaha. We are resuming this class after the long holidays, that is summer recess. And also we are beginning this in-person session. And if some of you remember, we were discussing the 12th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, which is the most important foundational canonical work in Hindu Vedantic tradition. And the 12th chapter deals with the philosophy of devotion, how we can approach God through the path of devotion. There are 4 distinct paths outlined in Hindu tradition for approaching God, for practicing spirituality, which in Hindu tradition means the bringing out the divine which is already present within all of us. We can do that through unselfish work, by practicing total unselfishness, by realizing the all-pervading divine reality, the transcendental spiritual reality present everywhere, by the practice of sense control, self-restraint, and of course through the path of devotion. So the 12th chapter called Bhakti-Yoga has got only 20 verses in Sanskrit, which deals with different aspects of practicing devotion. When we read it, we understand it's not just about one particular religious tradition, but rather it's all about our spiritual aspirations. We already discussed from 8th to 11th verse, we discussed 4 stages, 4 phases in the evolution of our devotion. The first stage is by practicing selfless work. We do our duty, not only in spiritual sphere, but also in secular life. Whatever we do, either in spiritual life or secular life, whether in a temple or a church, or perhaps in the workplace, office, wherever it is, whatever may be our profession, if we do that with a sense of sanctity and sacredness, with total honesty and sincerity, but at the same time without any selfish intention, selfish motive, that becomes a royal path to spiritual life, towards the realization of the divine within is present in all of us, or in the language of the monotheistic devotion, in getting a vision of the Lord. The next more advanced stage is to do everything thinking that it's God's work. The third stage, if you take in ascending order, is to practice some kind of memory. Somehow connect our life with the divine. This can be done by reading a sacred book, by chanting, by taking holy names, by praying, through any of these spiritual practices. we can connect our life with the divine. The fourth and most advanced stage is, that's mentioned in the 8th verse, that is, by practicing the strong belief that the divine is present in everyone, in everything, and within ourselves, looking upon the entire human race as one spiritual family. If we can look upon the whole humanity as one spiritual family without looking upon anyone as the other, that's the highest stage of spiritual development. This is a very wonderful analysis from 8th to 11th verse. In a descending order, Lord Krishna mentions this. Now, we were discussing in the last session, we were discussing the 13th and 14th verse, which actually gives a list of the fundamental characteristics of a devotee of God. It's very interesting. 11 characteristics or qualities of a devotee of God are mentioned here. Advesha sarvabhutanam maitra karuna evaja nirmamo nirahangara samadukha sukakshami sandushta satadam yogi yadatma didaniseha mayarpida manobuddhi yoman bhakta samepriha. The 13th and 14th verses. Now you can imagine the first qualification of a devotee of God. One may imagine, well, Gita will tell you somebody who goes to the temple and pray every day is a devotee. Or one may imagine somebody who practices some rituals, reading some holy book, is a devotee of God. Surprisingly, Lord Krishna never mentions about going to a place of worship. He only is talking about being a good human being. In fact, it all amounts to this. If you are a good human being, you are a spiritual man. You are a devotee of God. In fact, before beginning this text, I can quote another famous verse, which is very revolutionary in its content, which says, if you go on repeating God's name all the time, but if you don't practice any of the fundamental ethical, moral, spiritual values, everyday life, you are not a devotee of God. The verse comes from Vishnu Purana. Swadharma karma vinirmukta krishna krishnedi vadinaha te hare dveshino mudhaha dharmartham janmayat hare. Okay, this Sanskrit verse, Vishnu Purana belongs to some time in the 1500 BC, 1700 BC, according to historians. What it says is, if you utter the name of Krishna is the name of me, that's the concept of God according to one section, one group of Hindu Vedantic traditions, people. Or you may call any name in all tradition, depends upon the tradition you belong to. Whatever religion you may belong to. Every religion has some sacred names. Some sacred word symbol by which we try to invoke the divine. According to the devotees of Krishna, Krishna is the name. What it says, you see, Swadharma karma vinirmukta. A person who is not practicing any ethical moral values and is not doing his duty. A duty could mean maybe not in the sense of modern professional ethics. What it means is a mother taking care of children, a student studying well, a teacher teaching well, a doctor doing his practice properly. Or if you are in an office doing your work sincerely, you forget it, you ignore it, and you take the name of God. And you don't care to practice, if a person doesn't care to practice any ethical, moral values, taking the name of God all the time, going to a temple or a church or any place of worship for the matter, depending upon the tradition we belong to. And he uses very strong, you see, Te harehe dveshino mudhaha. They are deluded, and harehe dveshinaha means they are the enemies of the Lord. That's a very strong statement. That's why I mentioned earlier, Gita is considered to be a universal classic. It's not anything about one particular sect or group or anything. It's all about the natural spiritual aspirations of any ordinary person who wants to connect with something higher. See, this statement, it's not from Gita, remember, it's from another much more ancient work. I think it's a much more ancient work. So, this is the essence of the 3-4 verses that we are going to discuss today. The first one is Adveshta Sarvabhutanam. Sarvabhutanam Adveshta means he doesn't hate anyone. He doesn't have any hostile feelings towards anyone. He doesn't have any animosity towards anyone. He doesn't have any negative feelings against anyone. We should not even hate non-believers. Leave alone people belonging to another traditions. We should not even hate non-believers, because non-believers also are part of the creation. So, anyone who cannot mentally, physically hate anyone. Sarvabhutanam adveshta. Actually, Sarvesham Bhutanam adveshta. Actually, the word Bhuta in Sanskrit means anything which has come into existence. That's the real meaning of Bhuta. Sarva means all. Anything which has come into existence. And you are a non-hater. You are non-hostile. That's the literal meaning. Means you don't have any hostile feelings or hatred towards anyone or anything in this world. Now this is a simple thing. So any good human being can be a devotee of God. You don't even announce your devotion to God. That's why Vivekananda, he was a very great social reformer and also been a great reformer of modern Hinduism. He says, you live your life in such a way that even if you do not accept God, God will accept you. It's interesting. That verse that I quoted earlier in Vishnu Purana, actually, Sudharma karma vinirmukta Krishna Krishnedi vadinaha te hare dveshino mudhaha dharmartham janmayat hare. So, a person who forgets his duties and responsibilities, who doesn't follow any ethical, moral, spiritual values, but he takes the name of God mechanically, well, those persons are deluded and they are enemies of God. On the other hand, those who practice the dharmic values, ethical, moral values, and does his duty properly, is not negligent or indifferent towards his responsibilities, that person is a devotee of God. So, Adveshta Sarvabhutana Maitra Karuna Evacha. Maitra means somebody who has got Maitri. Later, in that second part of dealing with the same verses, we will discuss the whole text again with the help of the great commentaries. That's the normal practice we do here. So now I will give a general implication of these verses. So, Maitra Karuna Evacha. You are a friend of everyone and you are sympathetic towards everyone. Nirmama. You are not egoistic, you don't consider anything as yours, you don't have the identification that I am the one who is everything. So, it is a man-centered idea of philosophy. It's not God-centered. That's something interesting. If one can become a good human being, you cannot help being a devotee of God. If we are good human beings, invariably we'll be devotees of God. That's the meaning of Adveshta Sarvabhutana. First qualification. Zero hatred, animosity, hostility towards anyone. You may have heard of Buddha who did not believe, at least he did not affirm his belief or faith in God. But he was a supreme example of this. I don't mean to say that those who believe in God are different, not at all. They're great human beings, they're great devotees of God, but also great human beings. In fact, all genuine spiritual devotees of God are good human beings. They are the same. But it also says that you can be a good human being, you can really become a good human being without necessarily affirming your faith in God. That's the meaning of this verse I mentioned. Swadharma karma vinirmukta Krishna Krishnedi vadinaha. A person who is totally indifferent, negligent to his duties, responsibilities, and ethical values, they sarve dveshino mudha, they are all enemies of God. On the other hand, those who don't care to go to a temple or a church or a place of worship, don't pay the priest or anyone, don't read a book mechanically every day with a sense of as a ritual, but lives a good life, does his duty properly, doesn't hate anyone, is a friend of all, maitra karuna evacha. So sarvabhudanam maitra, sarvabhudanam karuna. It means you don't have any hatred towards anyone, you are a friend of everyone, you are sympathetic towards everyone. And such people naturally will be free from egotism. Without being free from egotism, it is impossible for us to have a good feeling, a friendly attitude towards everyone in this world, including even those who may not be friendly with us. We should be friendly with them. So this is the fourth one is nirmama, nirahankara, zero ego. This is fifth quality. Sixth one is samadukha sukha kshami. It contains two qualities, samadukha sukha kshami. Now, it's an attitude of mind. You look upon happiness and unhappiness both with the same equanimity of mind. And you are a woman or man of forbearance, the willingness to endure the good and bad, taking everything in his strain, without being always looking for the pleasant and terribly devastated when something unpleasant happens. That's not the nature of God. In fact, one essential characteristic of a true devotee of God, that he will have a peculiar kind of strong will and strong mind. It is not the strong will or strong mind of a Hitler or a Genghis Khan. It is a different kind of mental strength. You may have to face problems and challenges. Well, I can give many examples from Hindu Vedantic tradition, but I can give many examples from Christian tradition you may be more familiar with. For example, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint Francis of Assisi, Saint Augustine, or Saint Joseph, anyone you take, for Saint Joseph of Cross, any of these great mystics who received only post-mortem recognition and who were subjected to a lot of persecution during their life. But what a strong will they displayed. Peculiar kind of mental strength. You know, the strength of a wrestler, the strength of a spiritual seeker is a strength of different quality. That's why, in the next verse, Lord Krishna says, Santushta Sadadyogi Yadatma Dridhanishchaya, strong will. A strong will is another essential characteristic, indispensable characteristic of a devotee of God. Again, it is not a determinism to do something good or bad, come what may. No. It is a determinism that helps you to stick to your high ideal all the time. So, you can imagine if a person gets all these qualities. Again, I want to remind you, never does Lord Krishna mention you should go to my temple and pray to me. Never. Absolutely zero. That is the universality of Gita. Lord Krishna says the temple should come to you instead of you going to the temple. Actually, if we can practice all these virtues and values, our mind becomes holy, our heart becomes the temple. So the temple comes to us instead of us going to the temple. It's again, I'm using the language of metaphor. Means when we realize the divine within ourselves. When we practice these great spiritual values. That is, Advaita Sarvabhudana Maitra Karuna Evaja Nirmamo Nirahangara Sama Dukha Sukha Kshami. So the ability to stand, to endure, to be unaffected, to take a view of equanimity towards the good and bad, coupled with a strong determination and strong will, these are essential characteristics of a true devotee of God. Remember, it doesn't mean that these characteristics make up a devotee. No, that should not be interpreted the other way. All these qualities together equal to devotion. No. A devotee will have all these qualities. Because there are many people who are strong-willed, not necessarily devotees of God. There are people who don't really necessarily hate anyone. That doesn't necessarily, but many other lapses may be there. But a devotee of God will have all these qualities. Advaita Sarvabhudana means zero hatred, no hostility towards anyone. Sarvabhudana Maitra, a friend of everyone. Karuna, sympathetic towards everyone. And again, the ability to stand, to withstand good and bad. To remain unaffected by something that's good or bad. Not being infatuated by something that gives you happiness and be driven away by something that makes you unhappy. That's the essential characteristic of a devotee of God. Then the 14th verse, Shankaracharya and other commentators have written wonderful statements on these very, very important ideas. You can find that it's a universality of Vedanta. Again, I have to remind you, it never mentions anything about any ritual that you should perform or anything. You should just become a good human being. That's the essence of being a devotee of God. Sandushta sadadam yogi yadatma dhrinishyeka mayarpidam anubuddhi yoman bhaktasya priya. Santushta, the word santushta. It means you have a peculiar kind of deep sense of inner fulfillment and contentment. It's not just happiness or joy. That becomes clear in the succeeding verses. For example, Lord Krishna says in the 17th verse, Yo na krishyadi na dveshti. That is also a devotee's characteristic quality. He is not overjoyed when something good happens. So that also is there. So the point is, you have a deep sense of inner fulfillment and contentment. That's not just happiness that a person gets when he buys a new car, when he buys a yacht or a private jet. That's not the kind of happiness that we get when we buy something, when we get something, when you obtain something. Because what we obtain will be lost tomorrow. This is when we are able to connect our mind and emotions and feelings with the divine spark, the presence of the Lord within ourselves. That gives us a strange kind of inner fulfillment. A spark of this we can see when we do any good, noble, unselfish deed. Even if you, with a great, noble-hearted attitude, as an act of charity, if you help a person with $100, a person is badly in need of money, medical help, and you feel, oh, I have done something sensible. So immediately our mind gets a feeling of inner contentment. It is not a joy that you derive when you buy an expensive car, a Rolls Royce or something. No. Rather, it is the natural inner fulfillment when we do something good, something noble, something sensible, something spiritual, out of which we get a kind of inner fulfillment. So that word is called santosha, means some is actually a preposition, what we call upasarga in Sanskrit grammar. When it's added to this root, it means all comprehensive inner contentment. Satatam yogi. So he's always satatam santushtam. It's always zero complaint. Even if something painful happens, no complaint. That again explains what I said earlier. Great men, great spiritual seekers sometimes go through many trying circumstances, difficult times, persecutions, as you can find in the history of great saints, but still they were not devastated because they could connect themselves with the divine, the transcendental reality, which gave them this sense of inner fulfillment. So this is satatam santushta. Yoga means you're connected to the divine. So what happens, you're always established in meditation, in self-introspection. Yatatma, you're self-controlled, self-restrained, natural self-restraint. It's a kind of maturity, a kind of common sense we develop when we take to spiritual life. There's a particular kind of common sense that we develop when we take to spiritual life. And that common sense could be called roughly, it's something very similar to what we call emotional intelligence. Person may be very brilliant, above 120 IQ, but emotionally very immature. It's often possible. But emotional maturity, EQ as you call it, is different. It expresses itself as a natural ability to be moderate, self-restrained, self-controlled, to be proper in the true sense of the term, not in the superficial sense it is used in British English, or etiquette, no. To be proper in the sense to be moderate, to be self-restrained, to be what we call wisdom or wise. So, this naturally comes when you take to spiritual life. That's an interesting thing. When you take to spiritual life, all these qualities naturally come to you. No one can say, I'm a spiritual seeker, I'm a devotee of God, and he hates everyone. No one can say, I'm a devotee of God, and he's always complaining, nagging, unhappy. It's a bad name, it's a bad reputation to God. You claim to be a devotee of God, and you are all the time unhappy. So that's why santushta, self-contented, then yogi yatatma, self-restrained, self-controlled. All these naturally come when we turn to spiritual life. Because in spiritual life, we are turning towards ourselves. We are actually turning our attention inward. We are turning our inquiry inward. We are trying to go away from the physical, from the sensory level of our consciousness. We are trying to reach a higher level of what you call trans-empirical consciousness, means going beyond empirical, beyond the sensory. And when that happens, naturally, we feel a kind of self-restraint. And then there is sake, I only mean strong will. Again, I mentioned earlier, there is not a strong will of a military commander. The strong will of a man or a woman who stick to one great ideal. Because that alone can make him or make that person reach spiritual goal. Any kind of mental weakness or emotional weakness can be a stumbling block in spiritual life. Wavering, dissipation. When you take a decision to pray, or next minute, oh, better, I will pray tomorrow. Or if there is the slightest problem or disturbance, we get agitated. So, all these are problems and obstacles in spiritual life. At the beginning, one may face all this, but in course of time, what happens is, we will be able to overcome all these problems. And as we reach closer to God, as God becomes a reality in our life, then naturally, all these qualities also become more and more manifest in our everyday actions. We can't hate anyone. We can't hate anyone. We can't be hostile towards anyone. We'll always be friendly with everyone. Zero hatred, zero hostility. And then Maya Pida Mano Buddhi, that's a complicated word. What it means is a person whose mind and intellect are fixed on God in that sense. Mana and Buddhi, my mind, emotional structure, Buddhi, the intellectual structure, are completely dedicated to the Lord. Now, what happens at the beginning for any spiritual seeker? He feels a kind of lightness. He feels a kind of natural flow. A spontaneity and a naturalness are fundamental characteristics of a spiritual person who has taken to spiritual life. And he is such a devotee, my dear. The 15th verse is very famous for many reasons, Yasmano dijade loku lokano dijade chayaha hasama sabhayo yogehi muktoya sachame preha. It means a devotee is not agitated by anything, and nobody in the world is agitated by him. He is not a threat to anyone. And he doesn't consider anything in this world as a threat to him. This is again another characteristic of a spiritual person. So, a spiritual person, a devotee of God, a person of spiritual accomplishment, he will, his presence, his thoughts, his actions, his words are not designed, will never create any tension or an agitation in others. They are not meant, they are not designed to create agitation or tension in other people. And not only that, he is so well established in a sense of inner equanimity that no one in this world, the world cannot agitate him, cannot bother him. Because he looks upon the whole creation as one spiritual family. He doesn't have the other. There is no otherness for such a person. This is an experience of the natural unity and oneness of creation and existence. Such a person will not pollute air and water. He will not deliberately do anything that violates the essential balance or rhythm of nature. He won't be doing anything that will somehow create some kind of discomfort or any problem for anyone in this world. So, that's why the world is not agitated. The world doesn't look upon him as a problem, as a threat, as a source of agitation. And he also is totally free from any such feeling, so that nothing in this world can disturb him. And then Hashama Sabhayo Dvegehi Muktoya Sachame Preha. So, he is totally free from, Harsha actually means joy. The joy here It's not santosha mentioned earlier, because santosha, contentment is the natural characteristic of a spiritual person. But this kind of excitement, joy that you feel when you get something material, because you're attached to something, you're looking for. When a person is greedy, a greedy man will be joyful when he gets lots of money unexpectedly. That kind of joy, short-lived feeling of excitement. No, a true devotee of God will be free from that joy. And amasha means the opposite. Jealousy, envy. And then dvegehi, fear and anxiety. So, joy, envy, fear and anxiety. If you find in anyone unnecessary fear and agitation, anxiety, he may be trying to be a spiritual devotee, he is still struggling, but he is certainly not an accomplished person in the path of devotion. Because if you have strong faith in God, there is no room for you to be anxious about anything. If you have strong faith in God, there is no room for you, there is no reason for you to be fearful of anything. You don't consider anyone a threat to you, a rival, so there is no room for envy. And also there is no particular reason for you to be excited, because you are always established in that sense of inner contentment. These values are meant for universal application. Even throughout history of humanity, human civilization, religious traditions, you find all the great spiritual teachers, epoch makers, they exemplified all these qualities in their life. A universal outlook, no distinction, no demarcation in terms of any kind of differences, no threats, no violence, nothing of the kind. But that means finally the essence of devotional philosophy is be a good human being, that's all. If somebody claims to be a devotee of God and he hates others, he is violent, and he always reading some book and some prayer, something, but the more he reads, the more violent he becomes. The more he practices his so-called religion, the more violent, agitated he becomes. It is not spirituality. After prayer, we should come out of the temple or any place of worship with a calm mind, looking upon everyone with a compassion. Advaita sarvabhutana maitra karuna evacha. It's a very important thing. So it is in fact, it's surprisingly, as I mentioned earlier, I won't repeat this again because it's very important. Because here, Lord Krishna never tells you, you worship me. You take my name all the time. You obey obeisance to me. You surrender yourself to me. No. Lord Krishna never mentions that. What he tells is, be a good human being. Be free from hostility, hatred, envy, jealousy, all these things for others. Be a friend of everyone. Be sympathetic towards everyone. That's enough. So this is a very interesting, very so universal. That's why Gita is so universal. So, and again, we need not wait for favorable circumstances to practice these qualities. We can practice these qualities in every aspect of our life. We don't need a temple or a church or a place of worship or a special place or circumstances, because conducive of favorable circumstances to practice this. We can practice this any day, any time. A housewife in the kitchen, a teacher in his school or a college, a factory worker in his factory, a farmer in his field, can practice this. It is an internal practice. So that's why it is so universal. Now, this experience of universal oneness of humanity, I mean the strong conviction that the world is one, humanity is one, there is no otherness. This idea was explained by Sri Ramakrishna Paramahamsa, he was the teacher of Swami Vivekananda, using a very interesting metaphor. Suppose you are going to a home, somebody's home, and you reach the gate, and the gate is made of, let's say, marble. So you may think, well, the gate is made of marble, but maybe the entrance of the house may be made of some other material. Of the driveway may be made of some other material. And as you enter the gate, thinking that other parts of the home may be different, then you find a gravel, maybe the entrance, the door, they're all made of the same marble. And then finally you reach the waiting room, drawing room, same marble. Then you go to the first floor, second floor, third floor, and it's a multi-storied building. You reach the top of the building, then you find the terrace also made of marble. But you won't realize this unless you'll be convinced of this, unless you reach the top of the building, the terrace. Similarly, in spiritual life, as we advance further and further, there is a gradual evolution from many to one. At the beginning we thought the gate is made of one material, other parts of the home or the building may be made of some other material. Finally, as we move further and further, we realize all are made of the same material. Like that, in spiritual life, as we move further, this idea, the Adveshta Sarvabhutana Maitra Karuna Evacha, you should be a devotee of God, should be a friend of everyone, sympathetic towards everyone, should not have any hostility towards anyone. Because slowly he realizes the fundamental spiritual unity and oneness of humanity and existence and creation. This is how Gita teaches the universal philosophy. And this is the intellectual conviction. In real life, you become a good human being. You cannot hate anyone. You cannot be hostile towards anyone. You are naturally self-restrained, self-contented. Now one should remember, it doesn't mean that you are indifferent. You are sitting in a corner. You are sitting under a tree. No. That's why in the 16th verse, there is a word used, daksha. Daksha means you are very assiduous, means you are very active, dynamic. You are very efficient. So, anapeksha sujit daksha, udasino gadavyatha means. So, certain words are used here, you are totally free from dependence, and you are pure, you are prompt in doing your duty, you are efficient, and at the same time, you are efficient because you are very duty conscious, very careful, very focused on doing what you are expected to do. At the same time, you are unconcerned with the result. I mean, you are not attached. You don't have any selfish motive. You don't have your own axe to grind. At the same time, you are totally, completely focused, efficient, dynamic in doing your duty. So, all these characteristics are given as the natural qualities of a devotee of God, but in a general sense, of any spiritual aspirant. Now we can have a short interaction. We are slowly reopening the programs, in-person events, so you are most welcome to ask questions if you have any questions. That I will be happy to respond to those questions. Perhaps we will start active discussions from the next session onwards, not next week. I have an announcement to make. There will be no Bhagavad Gita class on next 2 Fridays, September 23rd and 30th, due to some travels abroad. This frequently happens. I can't help it. So I'll be traveling abroad. So there will be no class next Friday, 23rd, and also on 30th, because we have Durga Puja celebration coming soon. We have an important celebration. Please remember, you can mark in your diary, calendar. Durga Puja celebration on 1st October, Saturday, 10 a.m. We will have a puja celebration, music, then classes and readings, and there will be lunch prasad at about 1 o'clock. The date is 1st October, Saturday, 10 a.m. It will be in our new temple, 2323 Vallejo Street, San Francisco. That will be the place where puja will be held. And so then the next Bhagavad Gita class here will be on October 7th. So please remember, the next class will be on October 7th at 7:30 p.m. as usual. Please continue to monitor our website svedanta.org for the latest information. If you got any doubt, you can just see our website svedanta.org, which gives the latest information for programs. Please remember, there will be no class next Friday. Next 2 Fridays there will be no class here. And then another very important announcement. So we will have the foundational text of Indian philosophy class at 6 p.m. This coming Sunday, day after tomorrow. But there will be no class on Sunday, September 25th. Again, I will be traveling abroad. So please remember, so now you have to remember one thing. There will be no classes on Bhagavad Gita here in this old temple. Next 2 Fridays, secondly, we will have a Durga Puja celebration on 1st October, Saturday. And again, there will be the important class that is sponsored by the Stanford Student Association. Next Sunday, 6 p.m. Of course, it will be an online event. Please see our website for the links for this online event. It's not an in-person event. Every Sunday, 6 p.m., we have a class on Indian philosophy. It's an online program. Look at our website. Thank you. Namaskar. Om Shanti 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 Harihi Om Tat Sat Sri Rama Krishna Arpanamastu.